Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Welcome everyone. I recently purchased this card from Bill, who's a viewer of the channel, and it's a beautiful card, but not something I want for my PC. It's a card I plan to resell, but it's sort of a strange grade. It's a 1980 Topps Larry Bird and Magic Johnson rookie, and the card is blisteringly sharp. It's graded a PSA Mint 9, but it has a qualifier, PD, which stands for print defect. It's sort of a rare qualifier. PSA they've never really used it much, but they use it even less nowadays. You almost never get cards with a PD qualifier. And given that I intend to sell it, I sort of have three different sort of paths that make sense. I could sell it as is. I could crack it and resubmit it to PSA or another grading company, or I could try to cross it over to another grading company and see if I have better luck there. And I'll go over those three options, including the numbers, in just a bit. But looking over the card, it is, like I said, just blisteringly sharp. Mint 9 has this just ultra light, I don't know, dots or print marks there. I don't know what those are, but that's the only thing I can see as to why the card got a PD qualifier. And that's a very strange thing for PSA to give a qualifier for. Usually PD means like it has like a print line across the entire card or like a very notable smudge. This is extremely minor. I don't know why it got this qualifier. I couldn't find anything else on the card. Everything else on the front looks great. Everything else on the back looks great. There's no print defects anywhere on the card other than that tiny little minor thing on the front. And again, I'm confused as to why it got a PD qualifier, but given that, that sort of makes me consider the three different options. Normally I would just sell a card like this as is, but I think this is a specific case where I might want to consider cracking or resubmitting because there might be some upside in those potential options. All right, so looking over the card and considering a crossover, which would be to SGC, or a crack out and resubmit to PSA. If I didn't know the grade of this card currently, and I was trying to predict what I think it would grade, I would take a look at it here, and I would notice the print dots in the upper right, but they would not detract majorly from the grade. I mean, it's, again, very minor. The card's maybe the tiniest bit off-centered left to right. Very, very minor off-centering, if at all, but yeah, I think it's a little bit off-centered. And you could say there's maybe some surface, like white specks around the Larry Bird particular on the surface of the card, but that sort of stuff is very, very common for this card here. Actually, by the print defects in the upper right are also, that sort of thing is also very, very common on the 1980 Topps basketball cards. Not that that means it shouldn't count, it does, but it's pretty standard. On the back, there's really nothing to complain about. Super clean back and centered really, really well. So I don't think there's anything to note on the back as a potential, lowering of the score. The corners and edges are super sharp everywhere. I don't think there's any issue at all. And the picture here, it looks a little bit like the lower left corner might have a slight ding, but it's actually just the photo. Everything is extremely sharp with the corners and edges. So with all that being said, if I was to submit this card today raw to PSA and didn't know that the grade the holder was currently in, I would probably predict this card would come back an 8 with a long shot at a 9 and also a chance at a 7. So I'd say like an 8 is my best guess, 7 would be my second best guess, and then long shot at a 9. And I certainly would not expect any sort of qualifier. All right, so let's consider the three options. And again, I have not decided which of these three I'm going to do yet. And I think there's a legit, argument to be made for all three. Would love to hear other people's opinion on this. What do you think I should do? Or what would you do if you own this card and you were in my situation, you're looking to sell it for as much money as possible? Which of these three options would you go with? So option one is just to sell it as is. And finding a PSA 9 with a qualifier comp wasn't super easy. Now, generally the rule is if it has a qualifier, you drop it 2 points, so that would be the equivalent to a PSA 7, although in this case I don't think that's particularly accurate. PSA 7s sell for about $1,200, actually a little less if you look at the last few sales, more like $1,000 to $1,100 or so. But again, I don't think that's that rule applies in this particular card, as it's such a nice looking 9 with a qualifier. Here's a recent PSA 9 PD that sold for $1,500, sold about 2 months ago. The pictures in this listing were not great, so I couldn't tell like how nice the card looked or how ugly the print defect was. So I don't know if this is fair in terms of that. But $1,500 is the most recent sale of a PSA 9 PD. And here's another recent sale of a PSA 9 with a qualifier, although this is a different qualifier. This one's OC, which stands for off-centered. And there's another one that was sort of strange that it got the qualifier. This card is, maybe a little bit off-center, but not to the point where you would need a qualifier. Today, this would not get a qualifier from PSA. I don't believe. But yeah, this one went for 2,300, also about 2 months ago. And I don't think mine would be considered as nice as this one, but it's probably, well, I don't know. If you sort of average this one and the 1,500 we just saw, that might be a fair way to comp it out. I would sort of guess that mine would sell for maybe $1,800 or maybe a tad more, something like that. All right, second option is to cross it over to SGC, and SGC is the only grading company I would consider crossing it over to. And here's the value of the card in SGC holders in various grades. You can see 7s go for about 1,100. 9s go for about 9,000, everything in between. Remember, 8 would be my best guess. So an 8 would go for 2,200. Remember, selling it as is would probably fetch around 1,900, let's say. SGC is going to have an $85 grading fee. It's going to be pretty quick turnaround time. So if it did get the 8, I would get a little bit of bump in value and have to wait, let's say, 2 weeks or something like that. Now, of course, the risk is if it comes back less than an 8, I'm actually losing money by doing this. Although a nice thing about crossover services is you can set a minimum. So if you can say, if this is going to grade less than an 8, for example, don't crack it out, just leave it in the case as is and send it back to me. And then, I wouldn't be out any money except the $85 grading fee, which I would still have to pay. And this option, of course, comes with a big upside. If it gets a 9, the 9 would be the home run. But again, I think a 9 is possible, but pretty unlikely. All right, and the third option is to crack it out of the case and resubmit it to PSA. And here are the card's value in PSA holders in a 7, 8, and 9. I did not include half grades here because PSA almost never gives out half grades. Very, very rare that they give cards half grades. So the card would almost surely get a 7, 8, or 9. And on the surface, if you compare these prices to the SGC values, this seems like the most logical answer is to crack it out and resubmit it to PSA if you're only looking at value, because the PSA 7s, 8s, and 9s all significantly outsell the SGCs. But there is some additional risk involved with this option. And, first of all, cracking a card out of a case is not a guarantee that you're not going to mess up. And now I've done it a lot. I rarely have an issue, but certainly an issue could happen. I mean, a little chip of plastic just flies in the wrong direction, scratches the card, and suddenly your card is now a 4 or a 5, and you've lost significant value there. The other risk is that PSA has just been so erratic with their grades, so unpredictable recently. And very, very strict as well. And I mean, the card could certainly come back less than a 7. I don't think it would, but if you've seen any of my PSA reveal videos, there's always, a couple cards in there that are just head scratchers or, 3 or 4 grades less than you thought. And there's no reason to say that wouldn't be a possibility here. And if you go with this option, there's no minimum to set. With the SGC option, I can set the minimum. So if it's going to be less than an 8, it'll just stay in the PSA holder and I'm covered that way. But if I crack it and resubmit, there's no safety net there. So here are the 3 options all on one sheet. And again, I think all 3, there's a legitimate case to be made as the way to go. Option 1, sell as is, no upfront cost. I can sell it right now. Sort of the safest option. Option 2, crossing it over to SGC. Got a front $85, and there's not likely to add a whole lot of value. You remember, 8 would be my best guess. So, adding 10-15% to the value of the card, and there's a little bit of risk associated there for that. Now, there is the long shot upside, of course, getting a 9, but I don't know how much to factor that in for realistically. And then option 3 is sort of the big risk, big reward option. A PSA 8, that would be a big bump in value, adding over $1,000 to my bottom line. And of course, there's the big home run upside, getting a 9, although again, very unlikely on that. This option does cost $150. Forgot to mention that. And of course, there's the risk of the card coming back a 7 or even lower. Those are certainly possibilities with this option. So yeah, those are the 3 what I would consider to be sort of credible options in terms of selling this beautiful card here. Again, would love to hear your take. If this was your card and you were looking to sell it for as much as possible, which of these 3 options would you go with? You do sort of the risk-averse thing, or would you, take the gamble and cross it over to SGC, or a bigger gamble, I guess, crack it out and resubmit it to PSA. But thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.